push a button. Welcome. If you're joining us, let us know in the chat where you are.
Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will get brighter.
Chat open. If I mess with it, it's gonna check me.
Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier.
Thanks for joining.
Ooh, child, things will get brighter.
I don't think the chat is open to everybody.
No, okay.
Put it together and we'll get it undone. Someday when your head is much lighter. Someday, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt
Walk
the
in
great
the
song.
rays of a beautiful sun. Someday when the world is much brighter. Ooh, child, things are gonna be easier. Ooh, child, things will be brighter. Ooh, child, things are gonna be easier. Ooh, child, things will be brighter. Someday, put it together and we'll get it undone. Someday, someday, yeah, we'll walk in the rays of a beautiful sun. Someday, brighter.
All right, if it's going, if you can just let us know where you are. I'm sure we have people from coast to coast tonight. Now we'll do-
I still don't think it's open, Terry.
All right, has anyone tried to? All right, I'm gonna try to open it. Let's see what's happening. Hello, everyone. How are you? So I'm gonna type where I am this evening. Everyone see that?
Yeah, they can see it, but they don't
They
have
don't
the
have
ability to,
access to
they don't
it.
have the
Okay.
ability to access it. It's under the
Okay.
3 dots there. You got to give them
Now it
access.
should be working. Yep, we got it. Okay, so go ahead if you are just joining us, drop where you are joining us from in the chat. Let us know it's working. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, we like to see already coast to coast, New York City to Seattle, and everything in between. That's wonderful. Thank you. Hi, love all the exclamation points. Welcome this evening. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be together for the next hour or so this evening. If somebody could record for us, that would be awesome. And we'll get going here. So I am Dr. Terry Ann Scott. I'm the director of the Institute for Common Power. And you see 2 logos here, the Institute as well as Common Power. Let me make sure that we are recording. Let's see. Okay.
Only you can record, Terry.
Oh, even the co-host can't record?
There's no co-host, I don't think.
Yeah, there are 2 co-hosts.
It's recording. We're all good.
Oh, it's recording. Okay, we're good. I couldn't tell. It didn't give us the permission thing for it. All right. Let's get going here. So the Institute for Common Power is a 501c3 educational arm for Common Power. I want to say a little bit about the 2 organizations as you're coming into this event this evening, because we have a lot of people who are joining us who have been a part of the programming that we've had before. And we have a lot of people who are very brand new to what we're doing. Common Power is an organization that mobilizes volunteers for voters. And we help create voting justice across this country because we believe that our most common power is the power to vote. In the Institute, we are an educational branch that catalyzes people into the work of creating a just and inclusive democracy. And we use history primarily to do that. And we talk about history gives us lessons. It gives us inspiration. It teaches us how to create that kind of future that we believe is steeped in equity and justice. And so this evening, I have a number of people who are joining us this evening. Dr. David Domke is going to be our facilitator for a discussion. We wanted to make sure that that chat was open because we want you to communicate with us. Please ask questions, talk to one another, make this imagined community in the chat where we can have a conversation both here online as well as in the chat. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. David Gomke. We are going to this evening, before I let you take it over, David, we're going to use this evening as a way to inspire individuals. We are here joined by people who have figured out how to use their platforms to create change. It's not an easy process. Nobody ever pretends for it to be, but it is an incredibly rewarding process. And it is something that we want to be able to give to those of you who are there some hope, some inspiration, and some understanding about how you can use your own talents to create difference or to create change. With that, I'll turn it over to you, David.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. This panel came about because we were the rest of the folks on this and I were on a Zoom conversation, and they were talking about the work that they're doing, and I'm like, my God, this is incredible. It'd be really great if we had a larger context for this. So tonight we're going to have 4 people talk about the way that they do advocacy work. They are all educators. They all do work in unique ways. All of them do work for the broader democracy. They're deeply committed to a more inclusive society, a society that tells the truth, a society that teaches us all. So each of them is going to talk a little bit tonight and talk about their work. And we got some questions, and when we get to about 2/3 of the way through, we'll open it up to everybody for questions. So each person is going to give a very brief intro just about where they work, what kind of students they teach, and let's just start with that. So Ivory Kennedy Jr., please.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Ivory Kennedy Jr., like David said, I work for the Ohio State University in our teaching and learning department. I service middle childhood education students as well as integrated social studies students. So the future teachers will be either teaching middle childhood grades 4 through 9 or 7 through 12 in social studies. And I also proudly serve as 1/3 of the Educator for Democracy team here at the Institute for Common Power. And I used to be a former 8th grade social studies teacher before all that.
Great. Thank you so much, Ivory. Jeannie Penrod, please.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Penrod. I am in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I teach at Southwest Career and Technical Academy. I currently am over our career tech ed program for teacher and training students, which is a grow your own program for young people to learn about the teaching profession. I also teach English, as well as the 2024 Nevada State Teacher of the Year, and recently named the 2025 NEA Teaching Excellence Awardee for Nevada for my work in advocacy. And I actually was just on the Hill advocating for education over Valentine's Day. So deeply committed to this, and thank you for having me here today.
Thanks so much, Jeannie. Luke Michener, please.
Hey, everybody. Luke Michener. I'm in Seattle, Washington. I'm a public school teacher. I teach social studies at the high school level out here. And I saw my friends, Vince and Jess, in the chat saying hi, so I wanted to shout them out to say hello real quick. I've been teaching for 19 years, going on 20 years in the classroom here pretty quick. I had a meeting with Ivory last night. Ivory and I are both on the Educators for Democracy team at the Institute for Common Power. And I told Ivory, I'm really here tonight to listen to Jeannie and Terry teach me some stuff, but I've been involved in some advocacy work at my school, mostly student-driven stuff that I've supported. So I'll be able to speak to that. In 2017, I was named a finalist for the NEA Social Justice Activist of the Year Award. And the Seattle Seahawks threw some recognition my way too for my work with the Institute. And that's one of the avenues that I'll speak to this evening. So thanks for being with us.
Awesome so much. And Dr. Scott, you're the director of the Institute for Common Power, but real quick, before that, you were a whole lot of things.
Right. I was a professor. I was an associate professor of African American history and the chair of the history department at Hood College. I left that tenured position to become the director. Before that, I taught in the Department of American Ethnic Studies, African American history courses at the University of Washington in Seattle. And now as director and all of the programming that we do, I have one kind of half foot still in the classroom. I teach part-time. I teach a course at the University of Maryland, College Park.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you all so very much. Folks, we're going to try to do this and end right at 6 p.m. Pacific time, so 9 p.m. Eastern time. I got another Zoom to go to at that time. Some of you might want to come to that. That one's titled, Is There Any Hope? The answer is no. I'm just kidding. All right. So we would love to have you. Let's go right here with each of the panelists and ask you to give us a quick little window into you and your body of work. The question here, the opening question is, when did you, or why did you, or how did you decide that you needed to do something more than whatever you regularly do? Okay, then whatever you regularly do, that you needed to do something in addition to that. So it's a when or a how or a why. Ivory, please. We'll go in the same order that we've already been going.
I mean, I love history. As a student in class, I couldn't get enough of it. The older I got, the more it started to make sense. I said I would never be a teacher, lucked up and became an educator. I do this because of the first trip that I took to Washington, D.C. with my eighth graders, teaching them about the founding of America up and through Reconstruction. And then us being able to go to Washington, D.C. was kind of the moment that opened up my eyes to really let me know that history was real. And if my eighth graders could understand and hold America accountable, then I felt like I was on the right path of being able to talk about the history of this country in a way that's not demeaning, but holds itself accountable, and then us to figure out what to do better. And then from there, I taught for 4 years in the classroom. And then I was fortunate enough to get this job at Ohio State. And the more that I've been in this position, I see the need for the real American story to be told, because I have anywhere from 20 to postgraduate students that don't really know enough about American history to then find their way in classrooms, to be in front of children, to be teaching them things. So that the reason why I love doing this work is because it's important to tell the story, the whole story, for kids to really understand and do better than what we've come from, because this is, like I said, this is one of those moments. So that's kind of my introduction into this work.
What's one thing, Ivory, just naming it, that you'll come back to and explain to us later, that you're doing that is above and beyond?
School board.
Okay, you're running, right?
I tried. I made I filed for candidacy. I didn't have enough qualifying signatures. So unfortunately, I won't be making this ballot, but it was one of the most rewarding experiences, talking about how the state of education is being taken. And a lot of common day people feel the same way that we do. They just don't know what to do. So if anything, I feel reinvigorated to go back out and have more conversations and hold those people that make those policies accountable. So.
All right, man. Thanks. We're all fucking knocking doors for you next time. You got it, to get those signatures. Okay. Jeannie, how, why did you decide to do something above and beyond?
So I had been an advisor for 11 years in student council, and I decided that I was really great at developing young people as leaders, but what the heck was I doing for myself as a teacher leader? And so I decided to join an organization called Teach Plus to learn more about advocacy, because I had no idea even my own landscape in Nevada. Fast forward to 4 years later, and I had gained so much knowledge, and about 12 fellowships later, because I just was hungry for this information of how to really make a change in my landscape, that I started to bring my students along with me. I was teaching seniors, and I felt that they didn't even understand their own government in Nevada. And so I put them through the legislative session, taught them how to track bills, write testimony, do all sorts of advocacy work, meet with legislators. And we had we had legislative impact, where we passed multiple bills in the state, one of them being financial literacy instruction for over 440,000 students in the state of Nevada, that essentially will receive now financial literacy instruction starting in 2026, as well as allowing cultural and religious regalia during graduation, making Juneteenth an actual holiday in the state of Nevada. There were lots of bills that we worked on, writing testimony, and then my own advocacy of doing those things, and meeting with school boards, school board members, trustees, legislators. I've worked on restorative justice bills, but it started with the desire. It started with the desire that I was tired of people complaining and not really knowing how to make the change myself, and then just taking the first step. And so I think that was pretty much the catalyst of me progressing and just continually believing that every step I was taking was going to lead to something greater than I could even know what that was going to be. And it definitely ended up being greater, because now I'm currently working on a bill again that started in draft form with me and the student who sits on the State Board of Ed in Nevada to have trustees of students, 2 students sitting on every school board in our state, that I'm very hopeful of
Wow.
because it's being supported on both the Senate and the Assembly side pretty well. So very excited about that next step and having students be part of the process that affects them daily.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Jeannie. Luke, when or what kind of catalyzed you, and how are you taking it above and beyond your everydayness?
Yeah, thanks, David. So I know for me, it was students in my school, and I know that there are a lot of non-educators on the call tonight too. So I've got a message for you about this, but for me, it was listening to the students who in my school about 10 years ago were looking for some space in the building, particularly students of color who were looking for some space in the building to have some conversations around race and some of the injustices around what they saw happening in the world. The context for this is just after, Trayvon Martin had been murdered, Mike Brown had been murdered, the Black Lives Matter movement had started, and those students were looking for an outlet and came to me to see if I could help facilitate something. And so really all I did was listen to them and open a door. And I think that's my message to folks tonight as a strategy, particularly if you're a privileged person. Like I check all of those boxes. I'm a white cisgendered male who teaches history classes. And what started as students saying, hey, can we just come meet in your room, turned into me helping them navigate systems so that they could run events, so that they could protest, so that they could walk out, so that all of these other things could happen within the framework of my institution. Because I can pull on those levers in a way that they couldn't. And I think many of you on this call can probably pull on some power levers too, if you're just willing to listen to the folks who are asking you to help them, right? So my advocacy work started really at just the building level at the school I work at, and has turned into, redesigning curriculum for the school I'm in and the district that I work for, and has turned into, more work with the Institute and trying to better understand kind of the roots of the history that I'm teaching so that I can bring that to the advocacy work in the school. But it all started really with listening to students who needed space. And all I did was open a door.
Great. Thank you so much, Luke. Dr. Scott, what or when did you get catalyzed to do above and beyond? I've known you for about a decade. I don't know when you weren't doing above and beyond, but what or when, and then what's the how for you? What's the how?
The how. So the what, I think when we say what, I want to kind of define what the what is. So for me, broadly, it's like dismantling systems of injustice. And so I hadn't really thought about the what or the when until you said this like this. But really in high school, I knew I wanted to be a professor at that time, but I also started to do work in the community. I knew I wanted to do things off campus. So I created a chapter. It was a chapter that was at a college, but I created at the high school of Students Against Racism. And I had one other fellow student who came and joined me, and a teacher who was dedicated to being our advisor. And we did the work anyway. And we worked with unhoused people in the community, and we talked about race and racism and those kinds of things. So as I moved forward in my career, as I was teaching, I always, when I was at University of Washington or when I was at Hood, always creating programs that were outside of the campus to make sure that these were not things that were bound by people who could afford to go to college or who were in a position to be able to get to college. So I was always very, very mindful of that. And that didn't change when I came here. And so when the opportunity was presented, David, I was talking about this the other day when you and Charles came to my home and said, hey, we'd like to do this institute. Would you have any interest in doing this? It was an easy yes and a no look back, because that gave me the opportunity. I'm not walking away from education. We're doing it a little bit differently. I lecture and teach all of the time, but I get to also do all sorts. There are no limits on the kinds of programming that we can do. There are no limits because we don't allow there to be any mental limits on it. And I think in the vein of what you're saying, Luke, the messaging that I would have for the people there is, don't allow yourself to be bound by, well, that seems like that dream is too big. Never think a dream is ever too big. And I think that is the how.
Okay, thank you so much. right off the follow-up question now is, as you started to do your work and you began to move into the spaces that each of you does work in now, and none of you are brand new at what we'll call advocacy work. You might be brand new on a particular dimension of it, but none of you are brand new at advocacy work. When you started to kind of get into the space, would you say that the challenges today that propelled you into the space, for those different reasons that you all cited, would you say that those challenges in this education system have been diminished, or do you think that they're expanding? And if they're expanding, how does that daunt you?
Are we losing David, or is it just me?
Let's see, am I frozen or is he frozen?
There
Let's
you
see
are.
it. All right. I see, I'm back. Did you guys hear my question or not?
I feel like we heard like 75% of it.
Okay. Do the things that you set out to do, are they getting better or are they getting worse? And if they're worse, how are you saying, okay, I'm not daunted, I'm fired up? That's what I'm trying to say. Because none of us would say that this is a shining moment for American democracy right now. So how are you approaching the challenges that you're facing right now relative to when you started? Ivory, please, first.
Ironically enough, today, the president of our university announced that our Office of Diversity and Inclusion is being sunset. There are going to be about 16 people that are going to lose their jobs or be repositioned. Scholarships are supposed to be intact, but we don't know. And all of it comes down to money. When I was teaching, there was a House bill, HB 616, I want to say, that was very targeted in the language, saying that I couldn't be teaching the things that I was. And I cannot teach where I come from. And I refuse to do that. So, I mean, just today I was emailing one of the representatives, one of the ranking members on the Higher Education Workforce Committee here at our State House, and submitted testimony in regards to what is called SB1 in the state of Ohio, HB 6. And in that bill, it defines what intellectual diversity is, but it bans the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion in any training, any courses, any scholarships, any programs. And while I am discouraged today, America is founded on a protest. People were tired of being told how to function in Europe by the kings and queens that ran that place. And they sought refuge in this country. There were European refugees that sought a new opportunity in this country. So I remain encouraged, because I have about 38 students now that will graduate this year and go teach. And I force them to teach using current events. So while it is dark, we have been through worse. This is unprecedented, but this doesn't give me any reason to pause, no matter what the university says, no matter what the state legislature says, because our existence is not going to go anywhere. And I think the louder they hear that, and the more we hold these people accountable, and the more we are active and have simple conversations, because this attack on what is DEI, and I say that we should name it. We should not continue to acronym it. We should name it: diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is not just anti-Black. This is anti-different. This is anti-different. So all of us that share any type of difference need to be having conversations and holding people accountable. So that's kind of what still gives me hope. I mean, if people can make it across the Atlantic Ocean on 3 months worth of a journey of hell, then we can hold people accountable at the legislative level.
Okay, thank you. Jeannie, you've mentioned several successes. That's really great. So are things better? Are they worse? Are they harder? And if they're whatever they are, how are you getting through?
I mean, things are challenged, right? Regardless of whether the landscape of Nevada, especially Clark County, is definitely more of the side of, I would say, diverse, yet the rest of our state is not. We have a lot of rural communities that are not, and yet I think legislatively in our state, we're kind of in this middle ground. I would say we're purple, which is a very weird space to be because you don't know when things will land and when they won't. So I think when you have a very clear no, it's a lot easier to navigate that because you know, okay, well, this is what I'm fighting for and this is what I need to say. And when it's going in the other direction, you have a very clear direction. When it's purple, you're kind of like, well, I don't know how this is going to land. It could go really well with people and it could not. Like I was speaking with the student before this panel today about potentially giving a 50-50 split of money where kids get a scholarship and some compensation for being on the board. But yet we had to have the conversation about Medicaid being cut and how our state may be impacted and that we may not be able to have a fiscal impact on this bill, and that may cause the bill to not go through if we add too many requirements of money, right? So now education is being put in a different bracket of like, we're competing with other things. We're competing with Medicaid. We're competing with things that we don't even know yet. So I think I'm very strategic in my resistance and rebellion that I am. I work with my kids so much in teaching them how to advocate. So I've started with my freshman teacher and training kids, teaching them what FERPA really is. What is IDEA? What is all of these things that they're hearing, because they get scared when they hear the Department of Education is potentially going to be destroyed. They don't think they're going to have school, right? My special ed students don't know if they're going to have any support. IDEA is already underfunded by 60%. Point being that I teach them so that we can go advocate together, because it's a lot harder to tell a kid no than it is an adult. When you take a kid to the school board, when you take kids to legislators, it's a lot harder to look at a kid and say, you don't deserve food over the summer. Or you don't deserve to have special ed support services. And I think when we were in Birmingham, I just still remember that during the educator tour, and we talked about how much the kids were involved in all of the movements of civil rights. And yet I think we don't really use their voices because they want it. They want the equity, they want the justice, they want that support. So I think the more we can teach them, then also the more they go home and teach their families, because they're little talkers. So they'll go home and they'll say, look what I learned. And I know, because I told them today, I'm like, you're going to learn all these laws because you're in school and you're in teacher and training, and you need to know your rights.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
don't think we teach them that enough. So it's kind of a middle ground for me right now. I don't really know where we're going to be, truthfully. I kind of feel like I'm in limbo, but that doesn't stop me in any capacity.
Sure. And we'll come back to you're talking about the strategy of engaging students and having them foreground that. So that'll be our next round of questions, is around strategies and skills. Luke, are things more difficult or more better? That's the best way I can say it today, and how are you getting through?
Yeah. I mean, no, they're not really more better. Not today. So my advocacy path has taken me, has provided me with opportunities to be in front of a lot of other educators. So through the NEA work that I've been involved with, I've spoken to educators in different parts of the country about whiteness. 79% of the teachers in the United States are white, 90% in my district. And so part of the conversations I've had around the country is how to navigate whiteness in education spaces really intentionally, because whiteness often gets in the way of this. White supremacy is the problem. And so, of course, whiteness will get in the way of anti-racist work. And so I think kind of initially it was met with a lot of praise, and not that that's what you're in it for. It's not about that at all. But I have a teaching partner, his name's Terry, and he and I would talk to a lot of crowds and get a lot of really positive feedback, and that's all good and all. And then the summer of 2020 happened. I'll remember the murder of George Floyd and the series of protests that happened, global protests that happened after that. and the backlash and that pattern of backlash is as old as the history of the United States of America. We're in that pattern of backlash right now. But after that, the work also got harder. There was scrutiny in the public about educators who were talking about whiteness or talking about race, and there were, I had my name in the conservative talk radio circles for a while there, and people in my DMs and emailing my boss that I should be fired, and all of this stuff for indoctrinating children, and so yeah, that's hard. That sucks. Like that was no fun at all. But I think the thing there that, gives me hope was that people lifted me up. Like David was one of those people. We had a long conversation after all of that about, kind of hanging in there and what I could do moving forward. And he even pulled me into some projects to keep me involved in some stuff. And then we keep going, right? The work is the work. And I think the thing I'll say, and then move to Terry here, I want to listen to her, is I think for white folks, it's really easy to disengage when those challenges come because there are off ramps everywhere, right? It's really easy to just take the next off ramp when the discomfort comes. But I think you got to just sit with it and persevere through that discomfort. That's the tricky part, but then in community, that makes it better. It makes it doable when you've got a network or a community of support who can wrap around you and kind of hang in there with you until you're ready to keep going. But as white folks, we never arrive. Like there's no final destination in this work. There's no end point. You just have to find your way through the challenging points so that you can keep going and not take the off ramps.
Dr. Scott, worse, more, better, and how are you getting through?
Things are really bad right now, Dave. Let me just call out the elephant in the room, right? You wake up and you pick up your phone and you look and think, what the hell is going to happen today? And what even happens over the weekend? We used to at least have the decency of major things not really happening on a Saturday and Sunday. And on Monday, we just find out that there's some other dictate that is sent to a school district, or that a fleet of individuals have been fired, or Medicaid has been gutted. It's terrible. And it impacts everybody in very, different ways, but some very same ways. It impacts me. I think about the intersection of my identities, first as a Black person, and then as a woman, and these kinds of attacks. And like you said, Ivory, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is about anybody that's different. And also what the right has done is made it conflated with Black and Blackness. And so there's a particular target. I'm half Haitian. So there are any of us can many of us can list all of the different ways that personally we are impacted, and also impacted just as a decent person with a heart who thinks that it's terrible that people are attacked who have nothing to do with my identity. So things are bad. They're very bad. And I want to call that out. But there's also an opportunity here. So 2 things. I'm teaching a course called the Black Power Movement at University of Maryland. And I have told my students since the beginning of the semester that this would not have happened in Florida or Texas or other places, that we wouldn't be able to teach this course. I'm lucky to be in a state with the governor, Wes Moore, in a blue state, in a liberal college where that course is, I don't have any fear now, at least. We don't know what the federal government's going to do. The second thing, in the Institute, we do a variety of things. We support educators. We bring volunteers into conversations. We teach people about history. It is one of the beauties of being a historian that I know that with what preceded us and what they were able to accomplish, that we can do this. And so right now, we have to lean into that as much as possible. When I say that it provides us with an opportunity, here's the opportunity. There are people around you, neighbors, friends, families, who are catalyzed because things are so bad right now. You need to capture their energies. You need to say, hey, I feel like you do. How can we put our heads together and figure this out? The Greensboro 4, the anniversary happened not too long ago. It was February 1st, 1960. There are these men and boys, because one of them was 17, who came together the night before talking about things, had a conversation and said, what can we do? Those 4 young men put their heads together and figured something out and changed the world. So right now is an opportunity, with as bad as things are, for us to capitalize on this moment and catalyze people around us and find community in those around us.
Okay, thank you. Everybody out there watching, this is a good time to drop any questions you have into the Q&A, please. please put them into the Q&A and I'll take a look there in a minute. I'm going to ask our 4 panelists this question. So I'll give you, and I'm going to give Ivory a second because he always has the least amount of time to think it through. But when I was at the University of Washington, there was a colleague who went on to be president, still is president at the Evergreen State University, George Bridges. And George and a bunch of other colleagues, long before I got there, started an orientation program for faculty. And so that when I came in 1998, I was part of that orientation program. And it had several different facets to it. One large chunk of it was about how to be a good teacher and techniques of being good teachers. And what they did for that portion of the orientation is they would bring in people from around campus who had a very specific technique or skill set that they would utilize. And each one of them would be asked in a very short amount of time, like rapid dating, to just kind of tell us, like, what's that thing they do? And every one of them had to get past the kind of modesty of saying what they did, because the reason they had been asked is because they were amazingly impactful educators. All right. So when you 4 think about a skill or a strategy that defines you see work, and you just, because you guys all right, what would you say is like the thing that you'd say, Ivory, I this, Luke that? Okay, so Ivory, please.
You started to cut out a little bit, but I feel like the question is, what would you say is the skill that leads us to be able to advocate? What would
Sure.
be best at? Listening, number one. I was fortunate enough to have a great program director, and she taught us how to deep listen. It's a deep listening activity, and using current events to help teach. How do we use what's happening today, couple that with a standard for Ohio or wherever you are, and still be able to teach? My goal with my students is for them to never have to lean on a textbook, but use what today's happenings to connect with something. So my passion. My grandmother couldn't read or write. She was born in 1924 on a plantation in Lowndes County, Alabama. I used to have to get off the bus and help her read in 7th grade, go through the phone book to call different things. And listening to those stories of how she was raised in the Deep South. She couldn't read, so that I could sit here and be able to talk about what we do to make things better for other people. So using history to my advantage.
Okay, all right. Jeannie, please.
I think that my gift has been at building relationships, whether that's in my classroom, with legislators, with leaders, with families, with community. I have always dissolved the walls of my classroom, very much like Dr. Scott talked about. It's never just been about being in the school and this is the only place we do business. Everything impacts us. Our community impacts us, and how do we contribute both to the community and how do we show up in the community as well? And so I think relationships in my classroom, but as well as being a bridge. I'm a really good bridge in between things. So I think my skill set is that I really look for where I can be a bridge for my students or other people, and then how can I help build the relationship so that they trust me, and then I can help bring other people into the space. And so I think my skill set leans into that and being a pretty effective communicator. So I think the combination of the 3 just allows for the magic to happen. And when I find ways to bridge from my classroom into other spaces, I just do it. I don't just dream it, I go after it, and I don't stop until it actually happens. So the persistence pays off in the end, and I won't, there's no telling me no, I'm just going to keep going.
The intentionality of that you and Ivory have hit upon, like, there is a strategy, there is an intentionality about what you're doing. I'm getting inspired. This is really cool. Luke, what about you? What's your talent or gift?
Well, I was going to talk about listening and relationships, and Ivory and Jeannie have both stolen those answers. So I'll try to offer something new here. Those are critical though, like the ability, especially as like I come from such a privileged background, I really need to be a deep listener, listen to listen and not listen to respond. But to actually hear what people are saying. So that's so valuable. Ivory, I'm glad you started with that. And building trust through relationships is absolutely critical. The one other thing I'll say is I think I'm pretty good at passing a microphone too. I understand I'm on the mic right now. So there's a little bit of irony in that, but I think that, oftentimes people who have the best of intentions will suck up all the air in a room and get in the way of the work. And I really try to take a lot of pride in, not always needing to be that guy, but to be present still. And I think that's something I've been intentional about and worked a lot on, and that is a useful tool, particularly for white straight men going forward. White folks in general, just try to be aware of the space you're taking, because you might be getting in the way, actually, even if you're intending to lead. And I think that's a skill that I've developed and I'm continuing to work on.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Scott, what would you say well, just give us one, please, is what is your talent or kind of gift or superpower?
You're right. It is hard to kind of say that about yourself, but I think that I have grown to be pretty decent at using history and story and to inspire people. And I think I tried, and I don't even try to be passionate. I am so passionate about it that I think that comes through. And it lifts me up. So I try to use the information and use that to say, here's how we've arrived at where we are today. And here's what we can do about it. And we know that we can because of what preceded us. And so I'm just really intentional about doing that and about staying very well versed in that information. One of the greatest things that I think happens is when people may post something or send me a message that says, I saw something you posted, or I saw something you said, I didn't know that. And so I try, and I don't know it because I know it. I know it because I keep learning every day. I pulled 2 books aside earlier. I was like, oh, gotta go get in those and do whatever research and keep understanding, so that, because life is like a puzzle, understanding how we arrive at where we are, you have to pull all the different pieces and put it together. And so I try to do that and then try to use that to inspire people.
Thank you all so very much. Got some great questions in the Q&A. So here I'm going to start with Nina. Right now, the governor of Nina's state is being sued because he is allowing scholarships for minority teachers. It is being attacked, that policy is being attacked as reverse discrimination against white people. My question is, how do we, as educators, as community leaders, have these discussions with the 79 percenters, as Luke stated, or the majority, to show that equity means providing opportunity without the feeling that we are stealing something from the people that are seeing themselves, they are perceiving themselves as losing something. I'd love to hear your answer from each of you on that question. Thanks, Ivory.
I'll be brief. SB 1 here in the state of Ohio is eliminating the use of the words diversity, equity, inclusion. Okay. In the very same bill, it mandates that public institutions create an American literacy course that mandates the teaching of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, a hand select of the Federalist Papers, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Gettysburg Address, and a letter from a Birmingham jail. How can we talk about any of those things without addressing the need for diversity, equity, or inclusion? The 3/5 compromise is a matter of equity. Why? Because the South was strategic enough to say we deserve a seat at the table to be fairly represented, to be equitably represented, because the North's population was much larger because the South owned people. So that's how I have been able to break these things down. That is what I included in my personal testimony to the state. So I mean, again, going to Dr. Scott's point, using history, I think you say the self-help history is a self-help book. So that's how I would break that down.
Awesome, thanks. Jeannie, please.
I think for me, it's always finding a common ground somewhere that you can meet on, but also I go to my special education background where if you need glasses, that's just an accommodation to help you see better. So giving people experiences that simulate what it feels like to have a different ability. For instance, I don't know, take the letter A out of every word and then tell someone to read this for comprehension. And how difficult was that? And then give them another simulation of what that would look like. And eventually you can show how giving an overlay that gives all the A's back just as a support to help that person be successful. It's not giving anybody an extra handout, it's just giving them what they need to actually be successful. And I think people respond to experiences because when you're feeling the frustration and you can't do what you need to do, then now I've put you in the shoes of someone else who may be feeling those things, that now we can have a conversation about how inclusion or diversity or equity, that's what it really is giving people that support to be successful as much as the person who doesn't require the support or no glasses or no overlays or whatever it is. And I'm going to say it that a lot of our other side of the aisle that may not like DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion actually benefit a whole lot from it. And so I think that special education services is one of them, where a lot of people don't realize that inclusion is having students in the classroom that have those accommodations. So what if that particular candidate has a son or daughter who has special education services? Well, you're going to tell me you don't want inclusion for your child to be in the same classroom as everybody else's kid? I bet you there's quite a few legislators that have students that have 504 plans and IEPs.
Okay, thank you so much. Luke, please.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the question, Nina. So I did mention the 79%, and I like how you framed it that way in the question. And I think, to reach the 79%, more white folks need to be talking, like that's white people in my profession. More white people need to be talking to white people about this stuff. And that's actually one of the things that got me into the work here. So I'll try to be brief. I know we're already running out of time. When in 2017, my colleague and I were nominated, we were finalists for this national award with the NEA, which was great for some of the student activist work we were supporting. We sat in a circle with a bunch of other educators who had been finalists for the award, and most of them were educators of color, most of them women. And he and I just sat there quietly and listened. And at the end, they told us, my doorbell just rang, I ordered a pizza, apologize for that. They said, well, what are you guys, like, why have you said anything? It's a little odd that you haven't said anything. And we just explained to them, like, we've been listening. And they said, well, we need you to go talk to more white people about this. And so we heard that, and we've tried to go talk to more white people about it. So I think my message is get comfortable with that uncomfortable conversation. White folks need to be talking to other white people, and instead of avoiding the hard conversation.
Thanks, Luke. Dr. Scott?
Yeah, so there's an element of diversity, equity, and inclusion and the attack on it that we don't frequently talk about that I think we need to understand and talk more about. And it speaks to why there are scholarships for these minority teachers. First of all, in talking to individuals to help them explain, we have to talk about structural inequality. Going back to a GI Bill, going to Jim Crow, going to all of those things that have created a lack of opportunity for individuals structurally through programs in the federal government that create a federal wealth gap. Going back just a few years to Wells Fargo denying prime loans to Black and brown people and pushing them to subprime loans when they qualified for prime loans. So talking about those kinds of facts, I have seen how that makes a difference when I talk to people about that. There's another part of DEI that we have to address. There's this assumption that people who benefit from DEI programs are less qualified. And let me tell you that more often than not, they're actually more qualified, because that's how misogyny and racism works in this country, that they have to be 150% to be able to get to the position where they should have only needed to be at 100%. What those initiatives do is they try try to prevent people who harbor misogynistic and racist ideologies from not hiring those individuals in. When last week we saw a 4-star, highly decorated Black general fired and replaced with a 3-star white general. That's why those programs have existed, to prevent the kinds of things that make people fire that man because of a fear of a loss of power and privilege. So we have to be very honest about what this means, and also stop assuming that DEI means lesser qualified people are getting something, because more often than not, they have to work harder and be more qualified than their white male counterparts.
Okay, awesome. Okay, another question here. I'm going to take Duffy's question and then expand it a little bit. The question that Duffy asks is, would you all recommend writing to school boards and university presidents and regents, letting them know that we support diversity, equity, inclusion, and programs that support advocacy? I want to take that and expand that and say, can you please talk directly to every one of us who says, none of that kind of letter writing or phone calling or postcarding or showing up makes any difference at all, that this is all a waste of our time for the average citizen to do any of this? Can you just speak to us on this, please?
Could you imagine if John Brown hadn't decided to forego whatever his privileged life could have been to make sure that the territory of Kansas and Nebraska was not going to be slave territory? Everything matters. Call, show up, be present, be loud. The Boston Tea Party happened for a reason. History has shown us that when we show up, we can do something. So if you are apprehensive, bring a friend. To Luke's point, bring your members of your community. If this is just conversation that you're having on the phone, on your Facebook, turn Facebook into real life action, because they want us to be relegated to just be activists online, and we have to show up with our feet. Because if people can march from Selma to Montgomery, then we can show up at our local and state levels and hold these people accountable.
Jeannie, please.
I absolutely encourage everybody to do everything you can. Write testimony, put in public comment with your school boards. I know a lot of people don't think that it impacts, but I've seen it firsthand with my students. I had 120 students putting in testimony for bills. We had a reproductive rights bill that was going to protect women and doctors from being sued last session. It was a constant battle between 49 and 50%. And it kept going back like this, and it was going back and forth. My students were watching sessions, meeting with legislators that eventually passed. But it took so much written testimony and comments and people putting in the work to really say that that's what they wanted for it to finally get passed. So I've seen it firsthand. Even in our state, our senator literally won, I think, by 500 votes to stay blue. So again, everything matters. Every comment, every canvas, every letter. And again, get your families, get your community, get your students involved if you have students. If you even have kids of your own, get their commentary and letters too, because their voice is really important too.
Great. Thanks. Luke, please.
Yep. I think the wrong thing to do is to look for the right thing to do instead of not acting, right? You can keep looking and wondering, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I get involved here? And in that wondering, you're not acting. And so I've found an advocacy path through my profession, and you might find yours there. You might find it through your family. You might find it elsewhere. But if you're just always looking, then you're not acting. So stop worrying about getting it right and just go, right? Get it. You're going to get it wrong here and there, but at least you're going. So yeah, I think the wrong thing to do is to look for the right thing to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Scott.
I know we're coming to the end. Two very brief examples. 4 years ago, just after what happened in 2020 and George Floyd and this kind of awareness that more people had, our local district here, they crafted an anti-racism statement, and it had prescriptions for what is not acceptable. And they wanted the teachers and the principals to follow it. And they got a lot of feedback from parents who hated it. And I got a call from somebody at the district who said, can you please help us rally folks in the community who will speak out and send letters and speak in support of this, because they said the Moms for Liberty, the naysayers, their voices may not be the many, but they're the loudest. So if we can come in and quiet those voices, we win on the side of righteousness and justice. And that's exactly what we did. And I rallied people, and they wrote letters and they called, and it remained. A second similar example, when we had a course on African American studies that was being implemented in the district, there was a group who didn't want it. It was going to be, it's an elective for 11th graders. You don't even have to take it. And so same thing, myself and a few others, we went and we told friends and neighbors, and we filled up the school board meeting. And so when we filled it up and people signed up to speak, so many people spoke in favor of it that a number of them who didn't want it, they just didn't even talk. They left. And the course was voted in and passed. So we have to show up and make our voices louder than the ones who want to create chaos.
Okay. Hey, could each of you please drop into the chat a way for people who want to reach you to explore any of these questions, or to get your inspiration or your suggestions could reach you? There's been a few people that have asked about that in private messages to me, in the chat or in the Q&A. If you could put in there, because I know that what happens is you've been mentored, you've received inspiration from others, and others want to get it from you at all. Let's thank you all while you're doing that. Let's close it with this. Maybe each of you could just give us like a couple sentences of in this moment blank. So the prompt is in this moment blank, and it could literally be in this hour. It could be in this larger context. It could be in the long historical kind of context that we're thinking about. So in this moment, I don't know. That's just what I'm figuring we could close with. Ivory, can you start us, please?
In this moment, wake up, get up, and go do something. Go do something.
Jeannie, please.
In this moment, don't give up. Keep going.
Luke.
Yeah, in this moment, rely on your community. We say at Common Power, you'll go further together.
All right, Dr. Scott, can you do that, please, and then close us as well?
In this moment, if we don't help the people who need us, who's going to do it? If not us, then who will it be? And so thank you. I cannot believe an hour went by that quickly. Thank you to everybody who joined us. This is just the beginning of a conversation. Join us for other things. We're going to continue to have forums. We're going to continue to lean into to learning from one another. We have avenues for you to do things. You'll get a follow-up email from us with some action items. And so this is just the beginning. We are not going anywhere. If anything, we're getting stronger in response to people trying to destroy our democracy. So we're here. We're not going anywhere. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, David, for facilitating this discussion for us.
Thanks, you all. You're awesome. Gotta go do my thing. See ya.
All right. Have fun.
Thanks, everybody.